Hey there, and welcome. I'm Cindy Daycheck with Queen Bee Creations. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be doing another Christmas project, and we're going to be using a number of different products on this just to add different texture and different looks, all of which are available on the website, queenbeecreationshome.com. And it all started with a bag of wooden pieces that my mom had kicking around her house that she passed on to me because she never got around to doing a craft with it. She got it from some gentleman in a wood shop who had cut these pieces out, and then she picked them up. And luckily there's a full set. So we've got these three. We have three. I'm gonna have to look and see. This one's got tape on it. I don't want that, so I'm gonna have to look and see if there happens to be another one. I think there is. This is the bag. This is the infamous bag. So I have tons of the other shapes. That looks like it had, well, that's it. Okay, let's go for that one. And I'll just use that. And so halos for all of them and wings for all of them. How cool is this gonna be? So I wanna do them kind of as a set. So I have the medium size and I have the small size. And then I still have lots of extra wings. No more of these guys, but I have lots of extra wings that I'll have to figure another project out using wings. But what I want to do first is I want to get everything painted white, and we're going to use white linen by DIY just to make my life easier. So I'm just doing a base coat on to start, and then we'll be doing other things over top of it. But I wanted you to see where we're starting from because when next you see me, it'll all be white, and then we'll start moving forward and adding some design elements on this. We'll be adding some design elements on the halos, and we'll be adding some design elements on that. All three different techniques. So we'll see how that goes. Looks great in my head. We'll see what it looks like in real life when I'm done. Stay tuned. So I have this on as kind of a base coat, just so that when I start doing other things, I've already got this on, so I'm just adding more onto it. So I'm going to put these off to the side just for a second because we also have the wings and the little halos. Now, here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to add texture to all three of these elements, to the bodies, to the wings, to the halos. I'm going to use three different techniques to add texture. And we're going to see how that goes. All right, so I'm starting with the little halos first because they are potentially, well, not even potentially, they're going to be the easiest because I'm going to be using some IOD air dry clay. So for this, and you'll see I keep a little damp cloth in there just to keep my clay pliable. So if you're ever finding that it's just getting kind of dried out, it's a little bit too hard, anything like that, don't worry. Just put a little damp paper towel in there. It'll soak up that moisture, it'll soften. So the idea with this is that I want to add molds onto these. Ultimately, I want to do it to both sides, because you'll see part of it, you'll see this side from the front, like when this is sitting on the head. I can get the head to show you. So we want to see there, but probably we want to see it from the back too, do we? I think so. Oh, now that raises the whole, what about the wings? Okay, I'm just going to do it to the front because I'm just not doing the other side of the wings. I am thinking that some of these new snowflake molds would have elements that kind of are patterned on maybe the old snowflake molds. Okay, I'm using both. just whatever seems to fit best. Not you, you're not gonna fit, you would fit. So I'm gonna dig out my cornstarch because some of these are definitely gonna need the cornstarch in them. And then I'm just gonna do enough, right? Like if you see, this just kind of fits in there perfect. That's a bonus. I don't have to do any of the other sections, just kind of up what's going to fit on my halo. Okay. So I'm gonna take this just slightly bigger than what I think I need, and then I will cut the rest away just so that I don't have to mold it a second time. So the idea I'm thinking, and where I'm kind of going with this is I'm kind of looking to finish these off quite simply, keeping them in the white. So potentially white and gold. In which case the gold will bring out all of the details of all of the textural elements that I'm looking to add. Once we have the clay pushed in, it's just easiest to flip it over. On some of these more detailed, take your little paintbrush and just use it to kind of push or tease your mold out. Just because then you don't get your big fingerprints in it, or you're not squishing the design element out of it. So sometimes it's just easier to use the other tool. Okay. Oh, that's very pretty. So I'm going to be putting this like this. So I'm just flipping it over very gently so that I can then take an X-Acto knife. Yes, okay, there's one. I was thinking it was up by the desk, but two. I'm just gonna carve away the excess clay so that this will fit on nicely, and then I'm gonna glue it down. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the other two halos, and I'm just gonna pick different patterns. So as much as I'm gonna keep them in the same style, I am gonna give them slightly different looks on their halo and when we get to the body, right? And I'm just going to taper this down because of the way that it sits. I don't think that I'm necessarily gonna need the pattern going all the way down. So, tacky glue of your choice. I just typically use a wood glue. A couple of reasons. I have lots of it in the shop. I always have it here because of all the furniture painting and a lot of the wood projects. But it also dries very quickly. I've never had a problem with it detaching, but you can pick the tacky glue of your choice, use that cloth to wipe my fingers off on. And then we'll get this one glued down. Try and even it out. And then I'm just gonna kind of make sure that it's meeting those ends. And I'm just kind of squishing these little ends out so that they just kind of taper off onto the rest of my design. And it just looks like that's what was meant to be. What I will do as this is drying is come back and just kind of gently press my edges once again in case as it's drying it wanted to curl up. If I didn't have enough glue right there to the edge, I'll just push them down again so that they're there. This is done, goes off to the side to dry, and I'm just gonna carry on, do exactly the same with these two, and then we will come back and start working on the wings and the bodies. When it comes to adding some texture onto our angel bodies, I want to do some raised stenciling. To do that, because these are a curved surface, is going to be awkward. That's a good word for it. It's going to be awkward. Because I really don't have stencils, nor do I want to cut up the ones that I have to make them so that they all arc perfectly or curve perfectly around this. So what we're going to do is more random textures here and there. So I have just, so for this, don't agonize over which stencils I'm using because I have no clue. These are just, this is like a little deco art one. This is a little Martha Stewart one. This is an unnamed one. This one I cut out on my Cricut on my own. I don't know which ones I'm using. And really all I'm going for is something that at least had some kind of pattern on it that seemed about the right size. I'm not going to take it all the way up. And that I could kind of work around. Now, here's the other piece. My big fingers are going to be in the way. These don't overlap properly, so I'm going to have to do part of it and then remove my stencil, wash it off, wait for this to dry, and then do more. So don't ask me why I decided this would be the thing that I wanted to do with this when it's going to be challenging. It just is. Now, to do a raised stenciling, all you're doing is you're taking a stencil and instead of using paint, you are smearing in, some kind of a texture medium. So I am just using wood filler. You could use spackle, you could pay for a special texture medium. I never do, I just use what I got, and it tends to be cheaper than a specialty product. You just want it to be something that is going to dry hard enough that, and of course I start with the smallest stencil possible, right? The most challenging of all three. That is just so me. Oh my goodness gracious. So all that you want to do, so much easier on a drawer front, let me tell you. But all you want to do is you just want to smear this in, and you do want to try and get it semi-smooth in there so that, you know, you don't have huge big lumps and bumps. But with the wood fill, I do get the ability afterward to sand it down if I choose. And obviously that your texture is going to be as raised as your stencil is. So it's going to be raised up as thick as your stencil, which is why items like, you know, the Jamie Ray Vintage stencils that I carry in the shop, queenbeecreationshome.com, are really good for this kind of a project. I just didn't have any that were hanging out here that were really small enough for my particular project. But on drawer fronts and things, I will use those just because they're thicker. So first of all, so much easier to use when they're thicker, but also then I get a much more distinct pattern with this just because it's raised up more, so it's more defined. All right, so all I'm going to do is try and pull off a little bit of extra. And once this is dry, I can lay the stencil back over top of it and kind of rotate in again and go. This particular stencil is more awkward because it doesn't have borders. It just goes live right out to the edge. Okay, let's just roll that off. Clean it away from the bottom so it can dry. And you see that we end up with that patterning. So what I will do is I will let this dry, and then I will come and I will lay my stencil over so that I can just fill in this gap back here. but I'm not gonna take it all the way up. I just want it to be a little bit irregular. And then some of those really bumpy edges, I will sand down a little bit, just knock them down a bit once they're dry. So I will take this and wash that off because I don't want all that wood fill to dry on it. And then it kind of makes the stencil unusable. But now I am going to go and do something similar to the other two. As those textures are drying, so I can't do more of the bodies until that's dry enough that I'm not gonna smush it. Smush. But I can work on the wings. So, I haven't done this before, but we're gonna try it. We're gonna try it together. So, it's just, again, one of those things that I think in my head works, right? So, what I am going to do is I am taking some of the cottage color, right, the white linen from DIY. This already has a built-in sealer into it. So, it does mean that this next step, okay, as I'm saying, I'm getting all my wings out. Because if it moves fast, I gotta move fast. All right, so I have all my wings laid out. You can see a couple of the big ones. I will bring you down as I go into this next step. So what I'm doing is I am scooping this into a cup. And I'm thinking I don't need tons, so that might do it. Let's try that. And I'm going to add a little bit of paint frosting by DIY into it. Now, this is a thickener. It makes your paint get thick so that you can maybe trowel it on for some texture, or you could, use it as thick, kind of like icing, but you could use it on maybe some of your winter projects to mimic like snow on the roof. Because this has got a kind of a sealer in it, this is going to thicken up faster than other paints. Usually you want to maybe look to mix this up and then, stir it up and then let it sit. I'm thinking this might not need to sit for as long. And kind of what I'm hoping to do is use it. You know what? See, look at how thick that's gotten already. I'm hoping to use it like you would actual frosting. So I'm going to put it. I don't have a paint frosting bag here. I just have a big baggie because that's life. That's what's real. So I'm thinking it'll thicken up some more, but I want to get into the bag while I can. So I'm just scooping it up, dropping it into my bag. Now this is the same color that I already painted the wings as. So it's going to be tone on tone. But I'm going to get this into the bag. And then I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer. Okay, so we have our thick paint in the bag, and I'm just smooshing it down into a corner. I'm going to twist it and hold it like it was frosting. I'm going to cut off a little tip. And here's what I'm thinking. Maybe I need to do all these all at once. Okay. Okay, same technique on all of them. So what I'm looking at doing, figure out where you guys can see, is I want to put one big dollop at the top of each wing. Obviously a little smaller dollop on the smaller wings. Take my clean spoon and I want to smoosh it down. So I'm just dragging it down the wing. You could maybe just do a finger. I tell you, I use my fingers for everything. Okay, so good. Now, what I want to do is a dollop of paint off to either side of that smoosh. So here I can do 2. Just slightly smaller. And then smoosh them down. Smoosh you again. And you can see how thick that paint is. It has no problem in staying in that raised order. Now I'm going to do one in the middle of those 2 again. And then carry on. So kind of doing the 2, 1, 2, and just kind of creating kind of a little bit of a textured look that I thought in my head would sort of mimic feathers of wings. Let me see if you guys can see a little bit better. See how that's looking? That's what I'm after. And I'm going to carry on all the way down my wings, and then I'm going to leave them to dry, and I have no idea how long that will be. So I'll let you know. It doesn't take long for the wood fill to dry, and quite honestly, all that you need to do is kind of rub it with your hands to be able to take off some of you just break off those little sharp edges. So it's not something that you really need to agonize over with tons of sandpaper. You know, you're just able to kind of crumble those high edges off and be able to smooth it out a little bit. Some texture isn't bad because, again, these are decor items. They're not dresser fronts, so I'm less concerned with having a too raised surface on them. That's going to be fine. I've got all these crumbs all over my workstation here. So the next step in this process, of course, is that I obviously need them to be white again. So it's just opening up the same vintage linen and then getting these all painted so that I have the texture, but I don't have the color. So I'm gonna get this painted out, and the wood fill really takes the color fairly well. So at this point, I'm thinking I just need the one coat, assuming that I get that down into all of the crevices well. And that was one of the reasons that I had wanted to have these already painted. So look at how cute. It just is one of those subtle kind of designs. I love this on drawer fronts. You know, if you were looking at doing just a white dresser, doing something like this on the front of all the drawer fronts and then painting it all white again, it's still, you know, from a distance, it's just a white dresser, but when you get a little bit closer, it's just a little bit more interesting, right? It's got some texture, and you can achieve that with doing this. You could decoupage on, like glue on some raised textural wallpaper that they have, you know, the embossed wallpaper. That would work too, but you know, if you don't mind doing the stenciling, you're able to at least get a customized look, or put these only where you want them. The other piece, of course, is that as our little halos dry, those two will need to get painted out white. So just so you know, as long as I'm painting everything. Everything has had overnight to dry. And I want to talk a little bit about the wings. So the wings, you remember we used the all-in-one paint by DIY. It thickened up very quickly when we added in the paint frosting. What I discovered is, even though it seemed really thick, what it did do was sort of start to soften and deflate. So I did mix it up again and reapplied it after I had left it. I put it into the little baggie and I left it for a couple of hours. And it was still soft, it was still pliable, so I was able to do exactly what I showed you that I did, but it stayed. Now, it's had overnight to dry. The little guys are dry, they're fine. These ones are firmish, but if I really pushed, I could kind of flatten it. So it still feels kind of cold to the touch, which means it's not quite dry. The big ones, because it's got more of the paint substance on it, it's a little bit more raised, it's still got some shiny spots. So this isn't dry yet, which just means it will dry, it just needs more time. So I'm still gonna have to wait for those. I'm likely not gonna finish them maybe until tomorrow. We'll see. But I wanted to continue on with the project and pretty much show you how I'm going to finish these off. Now, I have to say I quite like these just plain, but they're not really going to stand out. So what I am going to do, I mean, you could just finish this project off. You could attach, you know, your pieces and be done. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit of gold just to kind of highlight them a little bit more and go from there. The other thing is if you're looking at this project going, well, I don't know where to find those big wooden things, so forget it. Bear in mind, you can do exactly the same thing with stiff cardboard. You could cut out the conical shape. You could attach just, you know, a little wood bead or head that you get from, you know, often in the dollar stores you can cut out wings from, again, stiff cardboard. All this could be done by making the shape. I just happened to have it, which meant it didn't make sense not to use it. So I am using golden rule, and I do have a fairly stiff brush for this, because what I'm going to do is dip my brush into the golden rule. I'm going to take a bit of it off, and I just want to kind of almost like dry brush the highs. I want to highlight those raised textures, but I don't want it to be kind of all over. I don't want it to be super bold. I just want to be able to get a little bit of that texture showing, and it's going to be way easier to do, you know, as much as I use my finger for just about everything, it's going to be easier to have a more delicate touch if I don't use my finger for this, because I would just get it all over, and that's not the point. So I'm going to, and you can see that light golden shimmer. Now you could use a product instead of Golden Rule by DIY. You could use another gold. This is like a translucent kind of gold wax. You could use Rub and Buff. And again, I would do it on a brush and to apply it. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the same thing with my little halos. I was thinking crowns, and that was so wrong. So my little halos, do the same. And what I will do, I think, is also apply it to the ridge so that I get kind of a nice, stronger golden look on that. And I will be doing the same thing on my wings. So again, kind of hitting those tops and the edges. When it comes to attaching them, I am simply going to be taking hot glue and holding it down for a long time until it's dry, and then I will do the next one. And I'm going to attach the halos as well, just so that everything is stable. So I'm gonna do all of my dry brushing, and I'll do a little bit of the gluing, and then, I'm gonna have to wait a bit for these. Well, I'm gonna see if they're firm enough that I can get away with just doing all of my gold painting now. I think the tops are firm enough to do that. So in full disclosure, I'm just gonna do it while it's still wet. But then I'll take some hot glue and I will get them glued together and come on back and show you the finished product. Here are our 3 finished angels. And I gotta tell you, I think that they are very cute. So I like the texture that we added. I tried to give you 3 different ways. Now you could just use one of those options on this. So if you decided to kind of build your own out of cardboard, you can choose any one of the options that I used and just stick with it. You could do the raised stenciling on the body and on the wings and on the halo. You could just use the IOD clay for body, wings, and halo. You could just use the paint frosting in your paint to be able to add texture. Whatever you want to do. I just took the opportunity to be able to show you 3 different ways that you can get kind of a textured look that, again, you could have left it just purely white if that worked for you. Staying in simple, I think that adding the little bit of gold helped it stand out a little bit, but it's still soft, it's still subtle. I'll take some closer pics so you can see the texture a little bit better. Let me know what you think of this one, guys. As always, love to hear from you, love your comments, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Until then, take care.